Ashmore, Illinois, and we've got State Rep Brad Halbrook and we've got State Rep Chris Miller here, and we are right outside a 1,600-acre solar field outside a gentleman's home. If I pan around here just briefly, you can see how close Coles County allowed that solar field to be built to his foundation. It's an incredible intrusion, I believe, on personal property rights. And here to talk to us more about it are Brad Halbrook and Chris Miller. Go ahead, gentlemen.
Hey, good morning, everyone. State Representative Brad Halbrook in eastern Coles County here, just east of Ashmore, Illinois. If you can see to my right over here is this huge, the beginnings of a 1,600-acre solar field that is expected to generate 200 megawatts when it's live. Of course, we know that it's probably not going to generate near that many megawatts of a night, and when the sun's behind. That's the issue. So this is the discussion today is talking about replacing our base load generation of coal and nuclear over time with solar fields and wind fields that have decreased reliability and increased cost. And so what we're going to see is what's happening in California and many other states is the fact that these are heavily ratepayer subsidized through the state and federal governments, mostly the federal governments. They are huge, hopefully the plan is from the developers to be huge real estate tax incentives. However, we're not so sure on these solar fields that the facility has a taxing assessment yet, but we know that the land would move from agricultural into more of a commercial or an industrial tax rate, but we're not sure about the facilities, so that's important to this discussion. Also, guys, the governor, back when he was just sworn in January of 2019, talked about moving Illinois from this standard of 25% renewables by 2025 to a much higher standard at a much faster rate. And guys, we're not on track to even meet the 2025 standard of 25%. We're not even on track to that. We're not even close. I think the estimates are 7 or 8% at this point in time at year 2021. And so again, the governor did at that time signed on to the U.S. Climate Alliance, which is a part of the Paris Climate Accord, another big issue for us. And again, we signed on, or the state of Illinois and many other states and the nation, but China and some of these other countries, developing countries or otherwise, have not signed on to that. So we have to play by different rules, or they play by different rules. Really a problem for us. Chris Miller, representative here in this district. Chris, what thoughts do you have? And then we'll...
Well, I think that just to dovetail into some of the things that you've been talking about, you know, I'm a farmer in this area. I farmed here for over the last 40 years, and so I bring a little bit different perspective when it comes to all these things and all these ideas about climate change. And if you just think back historically, as long as I can remember, there's been some sort of man-made climate crisis, which ends up ultimately just being a money grab and ends up ultimately at the feet of the middle class. It costs them more money to live here in the state of Illinois. And I know that one thing that I do know is when I was a kid, we were going to have the great freeze out. Then we moved into acid rain. Then we moved into the ozone fear factor. Then we moved into the earth was going to turn into a frying pan in the 80s and 90s, and now we're going to change to death now. And if you think back to your history, I know some of you watching this, or at least my age or older, is that the common thread that links all of these fear-mongering tactics together when we're all going to die between 12 and 15 years from now is none of them ever happened. And remember I said this, and we aren't going to change to death right now either. This is all a huge money grab by the government, by the federal government. We enrich our enemies in China and many other foreign countries. And I think that it's important as you drive across the state of Illinois that you realize that the solar is producing about 1/3 of 1% of our energy needs. We aren't having a climate crisis. We aren't. What we're having is an energy crisis, and the taxpayers are going to ultimately be the ones holding the bag. Another thing that we have a crisis of is we have a crisis of common sense and the ability to critically think. As we look at the statistics, if we look at the numbers, if we look at the reality of this whole event that's been conjured up by the radical left to make you fearful that you're all going to die if we don't make some kind of radical change. And believe me, remember I said that this is all nonsense and it defies common sense. We need to advance the capture of our natural resources. There's nothing better than what occurs in nature to fill the needs and to fill the void of our energy needs here in Illinois.
Can I interject here just a little bit? We just talked to the homeowner here, and he talked specifically about some of the problems with this. First of all, when we look at the property, we see it's extremely close, 67 feet from his foundation to the fence. He talked about the additional issue of glare. Can you go a little bit more into that? Plus, he discussed to some detail what he knows of the contract that was signed with the farmer, who now doesn't have to farm his 1,600 acres. Instead, he sits back and collects a lot of money with an escalator every year. Can you guys give us a little bit more detail about that?
Yeah, so to the point about the solar installation, these panels rotate on a steel-on-steel axis. There's no bearings. Typically, anytime in anything, whether it's industrial or agricultural, an automobile, anytime you have steel-on-steel situation, you've got a bearing there to reduce wear, and there's no bearings here whatsoever. Now, again, these don't spin at the rate of a high-speed axle, but again, over time, that's going to cause some issues with noise and the like. Who knows whether it'll bind up, whatever the case might be, but it's going to continue to get noisier and noisier as we go on. Chris, do you want to speak into any of the other?
Well, I know that another caveat is that, this area is famous for production agriculture, and we have some of the greatest farm ground in the world, and we're replacing our ability to produce food for a growing world need of food, and we're replacing them with solar panels. And I think another caveat is just when we think about we toured Prairie State yesterday, and they're hell bent on shutting that place down, and it will take 143,000 acres of solar panels to replace the energy needs produced by that one plant. And to put it in perspective, those acres have the capability of producing about 30 million bushels of corn. Now think about that. 30 million bushels of corn that are not in the food chain, not to be utilized by feeding cattle, by feeding hogs. When you think about that, those bushels of corn will feed approximately 3.5 to 4 million head of hogs to be processed to feed America. And so when you take all those things into consideration, it's really problematic if they continue the onslaught of turning productive farm ground into solar panels to produce energy that would be more efficiently and more effectively produced by using fossil fuels to do that.
Yeah, excellent points, Chris. Yeah, and again, as we kind of close this down and wrap this up, the zoning standards are non-existent in this county. I'm not sure that this being 67 foot from this gentleman's foundation, whether that helps or hurts their property values if they ever to go to resell their home or not. I'm really not sure how that affects them. But again, what's really important in this discussion is a decommissioning plan. What's going to happen to these panels when they reach their useful life? Can they be landfilled? Can they be recycled? What is the status of that? And that's things that we need to know as we move forward in this discussion. So again, 200 megawatts when it's up and running during daylight hours. Of course, it's not going to be at max 200 megawatts all day long. Again, this is 1,600 acres. So here we have a site that has 200 megawatts versus the Prairie State Energy Complex that has 1,600 megawatts. So just on just half of the acreage that this place has, producing many more times energy than what we have here. It's just staggering, the differences. And again, what we think is going to happen is reliability is going to go down and costs are going to go up. This is important to everybody out there that plugs anything into the wall. You got to be aware of this current situation here that's coming down the pike at a rather high rate of speed in the state of Illinois. Chris, unless you have anything else to say, that's all I've got. Thanks, guys, for tuning in.
That's a wrap.
Thank you, guys.